Well, welcome back, my cyber homies, to another edition of OpenAirAtheist. I'm James Theodore, still with the third, and this episode is entitled "The Virgin Birth Refuted." Let me go ahead and I want to begin this episode with a special story. There once was a prince, and this prince was always kept up in the castle. He's always cooped up in this castle, and so he snuck off one day. He went walking around to the edge of the forest. And as he was walking along this path, he noticed that on a tree there was a bullseye with an arrow shot right in the middle, smack dab in the middle. As he kept walking, he noticed more arrows that were shot in the middle of bullseyes that were painted on trees, and one after another, and he's like, this is incredible. So he actually stumbled upon this guy who was standing there. He's holding this bow and this arrow, and he was laughing, and he was like, what are you laughing about? He's like, you must be the most incredible archer I've ever seen. And he said, well, actually, I shoot the arrow into the tree, and then I draw the bullseye around the arrow. With that said, let me read this comment that was a comment left on my video, Rational Responder Exposed. And this comment is by C-Saber. The irony of Rational Responder's argument about biblical prophecy is even if the Old Testament did mean what Rational Responder says they meant, that is still not proof. It only shows that the writers of the four Gospels had a messianic narrative to go by when writing down their stories. I mean, is Rational Responder suggesting that the writers of the four Gospels didn't know the book of Isaiah? ? They didn't know the other books of the Old Testament? ? Good point, and that is the point that I'm trying to make. Please keep commenting, C-Saber. Okay, let's go ahead and begin in Matthew, chapter 1, verse 20. And the setting here is that Joseph has just found out that Mary is pregnant, and they are betrothed, and he's got some pretty heavy thoughts running through his mind. And as he was thinking about these things, behold, an angel of the Lord, angelos, kurios, which means Lord, and angelos, which means angel, was seen by him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for that in her is followed by the Holy Spirit, agios pneuma, and she will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. For he, this is a key verse for Ray Comfort and Rational Responder, and he shall save his own people from their sins. Now, all this happened so that might be fulfilled, spoken by the Lord, the Kurios, through the prophet, saying, behold, the virgin will conceive her in her womb, and will bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which is translated, God with us. Now let's read it in the Old Testament passage that they are quoting from, shall we? This is the ESV translation. It's a Christian translation of the Old Testament. Therefore the Lord himself will give a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Okay, first note that he omits the definite article. Okay, so note here that it is, he omits the definite article. Okay, in Matthew's Gospel, he omits the definite article, or whoever this anonymous Gospel is written by. And notice also that it says here in the Old Testament, which they're quoting from, it says, she shall call his name Emmanuel, and he says, and they will call his name Emmanuel. Secondly, note that nowhere in the New Testament does Miriam, Jesus' mother, ever call him Emmanuel. And notice the angel says, for you shall call his name Jesus. Okay, so note those. Also note that the word translated here, virgin, The Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive. Notice here that this word, the Hebrew word which they translate virgin, is actually Alma. And Alma is mentioned 7 times in the Old Testament, and every other time it is always translated young woman. And actually in this passage, if you look in the original Hebrew, it's Hey Alma, which means the young woman. So it's the young woman. And also note that there is a word for virgin, and it is, I hope I'm saying this right, Matula. I'm not a Old Testament Hebrew scholar by any means. And that is mentioned and used in the Old Testament, the Jewish Tanakh, 120 times. So if Isaiah was referring to Jesus 800 years before he was born, then why wouldn't he use virgin, the Hebrew word for virgin? Why would he use Alma, which means young woman? Now, how do I know it means young woman? Because that's what the word means. Look it up in Analytical Lexicon. Not only that, but look at every time these Christians, every time other than Isaiah 7:14, excuse me, these Christian translators always translate the word Alma, maiden or young woman. Why is it just in this one passage they choose to translate it virgin? Why? Because it's a conspiracy, and they are trying to paint Jesus into the Old Testament. Now, secondly, note, what is the context of this? Okay? What is the context of this? The context of this is that Ahaz, which is who Isaiah is speaking to, his city, Jerusalem, he's the king of Jerusalem at this time, is surrounded by 2 nations. And he's afraid. He's shivering in his boots, okay? And he's like, well, what the hell am I going to do? So the good prophet that Isaiah is comes up and says, don't trip, man. The Lord is sending you a sign. And that sign is that the young woman will conceive a child. My wife will conceive my son, because it's Isaiah's son they're talking about here. And the sign is not the son, but here's the sign. You have to read on. You have to read the passage. I find it funny that most Christians, they know Isaiah 7:14 by heart, but do they know 10? Do they know verse 10? Do they know 20? Do they know 15? Do they know 16? No. They just know this one because it proves their Messiah. Not really. Anyways, so the setting is that before this child is able to discern right from evil, these enemies will be no longer in existence. They will no longer be a threat to Jerusalem. That is the sign. Okay? Now, think about it. Now, let's just grant, for the Christians' sake, let's just grant that, okay, let's say it is talking about a virgin. Let's say it is talking about Jesus Christ 800 years into the future. What kind of sense and what kind of sign would that be to Ahaz? Hey, by the way, Lord's giving you a sign here that a virgin will conceive 800 years from now, which has nothing to do with you. And, yeah, that's your sign. He's going to be like, what? Who cares? What the hell does it have to do with me? So, again, it makes no sense in the context. So also, let's say that you and I are having a meeting and we're in the city of Chicago, and we're meeting about all these signs that keep getting blown down in the windy city of Chicago. And we're like, what do? All these traffic signs just getting blown down all over the place. And I, the dumbass that I am, I stick my hand up and I say, hey, I've got a great idea. Let's take all the signs and bury them underground, and then the wind can't, won't even be a variable in this problem. We'll have nothing to do with it because the wind can't blow down the signs if they're underneath the ground. Well then you're like, well, that you idiot. Well, how are they signs if you can't freaking see them? The same thing. Unless Mary was walking around Jerusalem, first century Palestine, with a sign on the back that said, yes, certified virgin by all the gynecologists of Jerusalem, how is that a freaking sign? It's not. If you can't see it, it's not a sign. So I think this has been thoroughly refuted. Also note that Paul refers to in Galatians 4:4 as Jesus was born of a woman.